Hello, everyone. My name is Nicholas Hayduk. This is the Portals community call from December 9th, 2021. Our topic today is document management on Power Apps Portals. So just a heads up, we did we did have the live call about a week ago, but unfortunately we ran into some technical issues where the recording didn't work. So what I've decided to do is just quickly run through my slides again here, so that those of you who weren't able to make it live have some of the content available to you. So this isn't the actual recording that you would have seen if you joined it live, but I'll just go through here again so that the content is available. All right, so moving through here, so quick introduction. My name is Nicholas Hayduk, President and Software Engineer with Engineered Code Consulting, Inc. Microsoft MVP, and I've been working with the Power Apps Portals product here for the last, 10, 11, 12 years now. My career began with ADX Studio, which was the company that built the Power Apps Portals, originally known as ADX Studio Portals, was acquired by Microsoft in 2015, and then Microsoft has worked on them ever since, and now they're known as Power Apps Portals. If you are interested, you can see here the links to all of my social media channels. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, follow me on Twitter. You can check out the blog, the YouTube channel, as well as the podcast, which hopefully we're going to have a new episode here. That's not something I mentioned on the last one, but hoping to have a new episode of the podcast out. Hope to record one next week. So little nugget for you folks who are listening to the recording. As always, just want to say thanks to the Jason and the team at MS Dynamics World for all of their support of this over the last couple of years that we've been doing this now. So really want to thank them and show my appreciation for them to help with the recordings and help with get the word out and just help facilitate the whole community call in general. So thanks to Jason Gumpert and the whole team over at MS Dynamics World. Agenda. As usual, we've got our portal news. We've got quite a bit of news actually this month. I think I got 2 or 3 slides worth of news. So lots new happening with Power Apps Portals. Then we will talk about document management on Power Apps Portals. And then we'll finish off by just talking about the date and time of the next Portals community call. Obviously, there will be no Q&A because I'm sitting alone in my office. All right, Portals news. So Power Apps Portals in Power Platform CLI. So the within the PAC, as it's known, the Power Apps CLI, as it was first known, now it's known as the Power Platform CLI, but it's the PAC PAC. So within PAC, you got PAC space and you got PA portals. So there's some commands in there that allow you to list the portals that you have, and then you can also download and all of the data associated with the portal, as well as upload the data associated with the portal. So great tool for ALM process if you're interested in doing it using using that tool. It was in preview and is now GA. So great to see that they have that available generally. I know that they've added some features recently with deployment profiles so that you can change settings between environments. So the idea there being often your authentication settings are different between environments. So if you were to export all the settings from one environment and move them to another, your auth would break. So say, for example, you have different Azure AD tenants for dev and production. What you can do with deployment profiles is say, hey, when I'm deploying to production, use these settings instead of the ones that I've copied over from dev. So deployment profiles are there, and I know that we've got Oxander, fellow MVP, who's been updating the tools he has within VS Code to work with the CLI as well. So yeah. So next thing on the list, read web API in public preview. So the web API for portals was a huge advancement here in the last year or so. They keep on making it better. It is now possible in public preview to read data. The initial release of it only allowed you to create, update, or delete records, but now you can read the data from Dataverse using the web API. So that brings it a lot closer to parity with the regular web API and just makes it easier. The reason it wasn't strictly necessary to begin with is you can read data using Liquid, but this makes it just easier that you can be kind of consistent with your web API calls. And that kind of ties into this next thing, which is liquid tag for code components. So within your PCF controls, which you can have access to the web API, you can now read in there as well. But this liquid tag for code components, what this allows you to do, so the general PCF controls for forms on Power Apps portals was GA, but now what they have is a preview for a liquid tag where you can essentially insert a PCF control anywhere on your portal. It doesn't have to be tied to a field on a form. So think of, you can basically build a PCF control, drop it on a page on a portal using a line of liquid. And so if there are PCF controls out there that already do exactly what you need, rather than kind of re-engineering that for the portal, include the PCF control on your portal using the liquid. So that's now available in preview. Now this one's somewhat portal related, maybe not as much. It's the use cases for internal portals, and that is the pay-as-you-go for Power Apps. So I believe the pricing is about double versus just like paying if you say, hey, I want 10 users, and you can pay X number of dollars. If you want to have the flexibility, you can essentially have it as people access the portal, it can kind of automatically assign them a license. And that's really great for scenarios like the employee self-service, where you may have a help desk for internal users of in your company where they can go and submit support cases. You don't want to license every single person in your company all the time. Hopefully they don't have that many support cases. So you can essentially on demand have these people acquire a license for essentially the month that they're using it. And then next month, if they don't need a support case, if they're not logged into the portal, they're not going to need a license. So that's pretty cool. But again, that's just for the internal Power Apps licenses. It's not for the kind of external logins or anonymous page views. Nothing's changed on that part in terms of pay-as-you-go. So just pay-as-you-go for internal Power Apps licenses. Next one here is the Power Apps portals as a mobile app. So you may have seen some noise about that, how you can, in theory, now install the work that you've done as a Power App within Power Apps portals to your mobile devices, to your phones via the App Store. So this works using a technology called progressive web apps, which essentially takes an HTML site, a regular website, and can bundle it into an app that can be installed in the store, as well as you can get your shortcut icons on your kind of home screens, all that sort of stuff. So there is, if you look into it, that it'll talk about offline access. To be very clear, this is more about having certain pages on your portal that would be available offline. So just kind of some static content does not mean that your forms or your lists will be available offline. So consider this kind of the first step towards a true app experience, but it's definitely an exciting step. So cool to see that that's out. Next here on the list, multiple portals up to 50. So right now it's restricted to the starter or custom portals, but hopefully at some point they will allow you to have as many community portals or customer self-service portals or partner portals as many as you want. The big thing here was when this the technology was first released, the way that they installed a portal was by copying in the whole set of data into your environment, and that data always had the same ID. So the website record always had the same ID in every single portal that was ever created. And so if you can imagine having to do that again, you can't install another portal with the exact same IDs. So they have updated their deployment process so that it can essentially generate unique IDs every single time. Just be aware of the implications in terms of your ALM process. When you install another, say you install the portal in dev, you do a bunch of work, you install another portal in production or test or UAT or wherever, just know that it's going to have different IDs. So probably what that means is that you install the portal to get the solutions in there, you delete your thing, and then you copy over your entire portal from development. So just be aware of that. And like I said, right now that's just the custom portals or the starter portals, and hopefully coming soon to the customer engagement portals. Last one here, and this was brought to you by someone who sent in, Mr. Feingold, I believe it was, Michael Feingold, had kind of let me know about this, that if you're still using local auth, I mean, hopefully you're planning to move off of local auth because it will get deprecated at some point. I'm sure it will be, but in order to reset a password with local auth, it uses TaskFlow, and TaskFlow themselves have been deprecated. So how can you reset a password if you can't get to the TaskFlow that does it? So he actually raised that with the support team, and what they did is they did re-enable TaskFlows, but only in the portal management app. So if you need to reset a password, you'll see the reset password ribbon button in any app where you have contacts, but that will only work if you go to the portal management app. I know that they're looking for a solution that will make it across app, but for now, if you need to reset someone's portal and you click the button, nothing happens, and it's probably, if you check in your console, it'll probably say task flows have been deprecated. If you flip over to the portal management app, the button should work over there. So thanks for the tip there, and yeah, just be aware that hopefully you're looking to move off of local auth, but B, if you're still there, that the change password will work if you, the reset password will work if you move it, if you go into the portal management app. All right, so that's what we've got in terms of news. Let's talk about our document management on Power Apps portal. So, I mean, this is something we see on almost every portal. One of the primary use cases for a portal is to allow customers to upload or interact with documents, so download or upload documents and interact with and exchange documents. So very common use case. Some of the more kind of business cases we see are, needing to upload documents to a case. So within the help desk, you go create a case and you want to upload things like pictures or logs or, any sort of documents that could be relevant to the case. Another common use case for documents on a portal would be the ability for a client to download their invoices. So perhaps you have an integration between your ERP system and you're moving invoices into Dynamics or into Dataverse, so allowing people to download those. That's another common use case. Another one would be providing like marketing collateral, documentation, PDF downloads, that sort of thing. So just providing that sort of content to your users in a place where they can download it and not having to rely on sending out emails with attachments, that sort of thing. So those are some common use cases that we see with portals and needing document management. So I'll just kind of go through what some of those options are. So some of the kind of quote unquote out of the box options, the first one is SharePoint. It's the most commonly requested, and I would say it's the most commonly misunderstood of the options. And we will talk about that. I think that's last on the list, but we'll definitely talk about SharePoint, what it does and what it doesn't do. There's also Notes, so that's using the kind of annotation table within Dataverse, and so that's supported on the portal. Somewhat related to that is the use of portal comments, which is a custom activity that comes with the portal, and then you can attach notes to that. There's also web files, which are the way that you can, create a nice URL if you want people to be able to download a specific file, PDF, Word document on your portal. You can upload it as a web file. And there's also the ability to attach files to knowledge articles, and there's actually some recent news on that as well that I'll touch into when we get to that thing. So those are the areas that we're going to cover today. Those are your kind of typical out-of-the-box options for document management on Power Apps portals. In terms of the download-only option, so that's how I'm going to kind of categorize these. These are the options that are great if you're just looking to distribute files and allow people on your portal to download files. So there, you're really looking at web files. Just to give you a little bit of background, historically, files, the way web files works is web files is a table or an entity in Dataverse, and the actual file attachment was stored as a note. So whatever the most recently added note to that record was, that's the file that the portal would serve when you went to this URL. So web files are nice because they do have a nice URL. They fit into the sitemap of your portal. And so You're limited there just by the size of files that can be uploaded into Dynamics or into Dataverse. That's generally a site setting that, or a setting that can be increased. I don't know, last I remember it was in the 100 and some megabyte range. So yeah, those are relatively straightforward to use and a relatively good user experience for people to download, because it does give you a nice URL that you can point people to. So if you have kind of marketing collateral that you want to give out, often that can be accomplished by uploading all that collateral as web files and then including links to those files on a page somewhere. Now, there are plans in the release notes for the current wave that we're in right now to switch this over, to stop using notes and to switch that over to use the file type column. So that is coming. Don't know what the timeframes are on that, but that is something that they are doing, so to move that over to use the file type column. The other option here for download only options are knowledge articles. So if you create knowledge articles in, I guess that would be Dynamics, because that's in the customer service area. So you create your knowledge articles and you have the ability to upload notes or attachments to those. Now, I've separated those because it looks like there's some new attachment functionality in knowledge articles that is specifically supported in portals. I really only kind of learned about that when I was prepping for this call, but it looks like there's kind of new attachments functionality, so you can use that, or there's kind of the legacy just attaching notes. Now, one of the things that's always kind of important with knowledge articles and notes and that sort of thing is being very explicit about things that you want exposed on your portal. So when it comes to notes specifically with knowledge articles, you have to use the star web star syntax in the note text. So the portal will only display knowledge articles, the attachments for a knowledge article where star web star is included in the text of your note. That way you could have other attachments that are included there and they won't necessarily be exposed to the portal. So you can kind of have some that are public and some that are not. So just be aware that that's kind of how that works. So the same thing applies to regular notes on the portal as well. So that star web star syntax is common in the timeline one as well, which we're going to get to next. So when we talk about the timeline options, so when you go and add, and specifically this is on the form, if you're creating a basic or an advanced form and you choose to add the timeline control to the form, you've got a couple options to how the portal displays that timeline control. So one is you want to display notes. So this is when the form or the table that you've got the form open for supports notes. In that case, you can allow users to create notes, and that includes the attachment. So they can create the note title, text, and upload attachments to that note. So it's very similar to how the experience works in the back end of a model-driven app or within Dynamics, where you can attach notes to a record. The portal does support that. Again, the star web star syntax is useful there so that you can attach notes in the back end without them necessarily being exposed to the portal. So just be aware of that. Portal comments. Portal comments is a custom entity or a custom activity that is included when you install the portal solutions. So when you are adding your timeline control to a form, if you say I want to display activities, you can make it so that it displays all sorts of different activities, emails, tasks, that sort of thing. But if you want someone on the portal to create a new one, what they will be creating are portal comments. So it's a pretty basic custom activity. There's a description on it. I think there's a name description, but it also includes the ability to upload attachments, and those attachments are stored as notes on the portal comments. So if you kind of compare and contrast these two, either way you're uploading a note, but the real question is, are you uploading the note directly to the record itself, which is kind of the first option, or are you uploading the note as a note to a portal comment, which is then related to that activity or to that record? So does that record support notes? Does it support activities? Those are the things that can tie into what your options are in terms of the timeline. So if you look at something like the case entity or the case table, it supports both notes and portal comments, so you can choose between those two. But if you're dealing with a record that only supports notes or only supports portal comments, then your hands are somewhat tied there. You have to kind of go with that option. So, but either way, you're uploading things as notes. Also important to understand, none of this has to do with web files. So none of these, or sorry, not web files, but just the file type column in Dataverse. So the file type column is new. relatively new, and other than what we talked about, how they are intending to start using it for web files, there's been no announcements about do we have supports for actually uploading to the file column on the form. So if you add a file column, so a file field on your form, the portal is going to basically ignore that. It doesn't support those. Hopefully it's coming at some point, but I don't know when that is. I don't know if they have it, if that's something that's under active development right now. The only thing that we know about is that that file type column is planned to be used in web files. So something to be aware of if you add a file type column to your form, don't expect that to work on a portal. And now let's talk about SharePoint. So SharePoint is, I think, what a lot of people are gravitating towards when they think about document management on a portal. However, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's definitely the most misunderstood. I think a lot of people assume that it works differently than it does. I think they assume that there's a bunch of features in there that aren't necessarily in there. So we see this leads to a lot of disappointment, and I think I talked about that in the call from last month about people expecting that I can basically get all the features from SharePoint and put them onto a portal, and it's like, no, that's not the case. It's very much a subset of that functionality. So the way the SharePoint integration works is that it is available only on basic or advanced forms, or as they used to be known, entity or web forms. So you could only look at documents in the context of another row. So what it does is it leverages the out-of-the-box integration between Dataverse and model-driven apps and SharePoint. So within that, if you've ever set that up before, you'll know that you create your SharePoint site, and then you enable certain tables for the SharePoint integration. And then what happens is that there are SharePoint document location records being created. So a SharePoint document location record is essentially it's a record in Dataverse that contains the text of the folder path of where to look for the documents related to that record in SharePoint. So for example, if you set up the SharePoint integration, often the folder structure will be like /accounts/ the name of the account _ the GUID, and that's where the documents will be. So /accounts/ engineered code _ the ID of the engineered code record, and then that's the folder that corresponds and will be shown when you open up that particular account in Dataverse or in a model-driven app. The portal matches that functionality. So if you open up an account on the portal, you can see the records that are associated to that document or that you can see the SharePoint folder that's basically pointed to in that SharePoint document location. So it's nothing more than that. So that's kind of the key, is that often we'll hear, we have this SharePoint folder that we want to just let anyone on the portal download the documents from. It's like, well, that's not how it works, though that SharePoint folder has to be attached to a particular row and exposed that way. In terms of security, the security is done via table permissions or entity permissions, as they used to be known. And the table that you need to be adding the permissions to is the SharePoint document location. And we'll talk about why that matters here in a second. But the key thing to understand about SharePoint is it's only used on forms. And what it does is it shows the records, or shows the folder that's pointed to in the SharePoint document location associated with the record that you're looking at on that form. So let's talk about some of the other kind of things that we need to be aware of. So you must use the default SharePoint site within Dynamics. So within Dynamics or within your model-driven app, there is a SharePoint site that's marked as the default. You can have multiple SharePoint sites, and you can have document locations that point to all these different SharePoint sites. But the portal, in order to do the security and to talk directly to that SharePoint site, the security is built into assuming that it's using the default SharePoint site. So make sure that the SharePoint document locations that you're using on your portal are associated to the default site in the default SharePoint site as configured in your Dynamics instance. So this doesn't mean it's like the default SharePoint site in SharePoint. It means in Dynamics, when you set up your site, you can mark any one of those sites as the default, and that's what you need to use on your portal. The next thing to understand is that if a record has multiple document locations, so there's no the relationship between a record and its SharePoint document locations is one-to-many. So one record can have many SharePoint document locations. However, the portal only supports a single one. And so what happens if you have 2, 3, 4, 5 different SharePoint document locations associated with a record? What happens on the portal? It will show whichever one is created first. So you can use that knowledge to your advantage if you want. A very common thing we get asked about is, hey, I want to have 2 different SharePoint document locations, one for documents that should be visible in the portal and one for that shouldn't be. And what you do in that case is you create those SharePoint document locations in the appropriate order. So you create the one that should be available on the portal first, and then you create the private one after that. Now, if you're familiar with how that works in the model-driven app, so if you go in and view a record, and then you say, hey, I want to see the document locations that are associated with it, and if they don't exist, that integration will automatically create the SharePoint document location record for you. What we recommend is that if you want to go with this public-private kind of split between the 2 different folders approach, is don't rely on that out-of-the-box UI. Don't rely on the functionality that comes with the UI that out of the box will create the document location for you. Instead, create it yourself. Use Power Automate to, when a record is created, create the 2 SharePoint document locations, create them in the right order. So create the portal one first, and then create the private one second. And then you can also use Power Automate to create the actual folders in SharePoint themselves, because when you create the SharePoint document locations, you have to put in what is the path to the folder in SharePoint, and you want that path to exist for it to work. So create the SharePoint document locations, create the actual folders in SharePoint, and then if you've pre-created it, when you go to visit and you look at the documents, whether it's on the portal or in the back end, because SharePoint document locations already exist, new ones won't be created. So it'll just use what's already there. So that's what we recommend in that case is use the SharePoint, use Power Automate to pre-create those and create the one that should be on the portal first, and then create the private one second, and then you'll have the 2 different folders that you can drop different documents into, and the portal will only display the ones that from the document location that was created first. You need to be aware that the subgrid that appears on the form, so there's columns for like the name of the document, that sort of thing, I think the date it was created, that's not configurable. Typically with a subgrid on a form, you can define the view and you can change the columns, but that just simply isn't the case. The columns that are shown on there are essentially built into the product and are not configurable. The best we've seen people do is, if you want to, you can use CSS to hide some of the columns. That's pretty simple to do, but adding additional columns is not really an option unless you start getting into some JavaScript. And again, you don't have a data source to add new columns, so you can't just like call into SharePoint and get other sorts of metadata. So we often are asked for, when we're doing this, we want to upload additional information about the document. So you essentially want to attach metadata to those documents. And there's really nothing out of the box to do that. However, what we typically do in those cases is say, and a good use case is a case. So you have a case that you want to be able to upload documents to, but you want the user to be able to give you context about those documents for that case. So maybe this is, you want to say, hey, here are the log files, and here are the date that we have retrieved those log files, and whatever other information about that particular document. Rather than adding documents to the case, add another table, call it case documents, where a case can have multiple case documents. And then you enable the SharePoint integration on the case document table. So then on the case document table, you can have fields for the metadata, gather whatever information you want. What's the status of the documents, what's the description of the document, what type of document it is. All of that goes on the related case document table. And then once you've created one of those records, then you upload the document to there. Some cases we've seen people want to restrict that so you can only upload a single document to there. That is possible with some JavaScript. Or it might make sense in some cases that you could upload multiple. So maybe you want them to upload their log files. Maybe there's 3 or 4. So you upload a case document, or you create a case document record, and then you allow them to upload, all of their logs to that one record. But by using a related record, a related table called case documents, you can have people add the metadata about those documents and then upload the documents to that case document, as opposed to attaching them directly to the case. So that's one thing we've done a few times. Last thing I want to talk about here is about the limitation that exists, not necessarily in portals, but in Dataverse as a whole. It has to do with the limit in fetch XML of link entities. So a link entity is essentially a join, if you're familiar with SQL. So there's only so many joins you can do in a single fetch XML query, and that limit is 10. And the way that the permissions work in Power Apps portals is that in order to enforce that you have access to the records that you're trying to query, is that they add joins to filter the records down. So they add join or link entities to the queries to say only return the records that I have access to. The challenge with the SharePoint integration is that since the permissions are based on the SharePoint document table, you can very quickly reach the limit of 10, because the way that Power Apps portals works is that it enforces the permissions on the SharePoint document table across all of the different record types that you may have enabled SharePoint for on your portal. So say, for example, you've enabled SharePoint for the case entity. So if you think it starts from say your contact record, so what it has to do is it has to enforce that, do you have access to the case that this SharePoint document location is associated to? And so what it's going to do is it has to do a hop from your contact to the case, or maybe even through the account if that's how you're securing it. So let's say it has to do a hop from your contact to your account to your case, and then to the SharePoint document. So that was, what, 3 or 4 hops? And each one of those is a link entity. So now if you've just enabled SharePoint on the case entity, you've got 3 or 4 link entities when it tries to enforce the permissions on SharePoint document locations. Now let's say you want to talk about SharePoint documents on an invoice. So now we go from our account to from our contact to our account to our invoices to our SharePoint document location. That's another 3 or 4 link entities. So now we're at 6, 7, 8. Let's say you want to add it to opportunities. There's another 3, 4. So quickly you can get to the limit of 10. Now the good news is that I did speak with Microsoft recently on this topic, and it is something that they are actively working on resolving, and we hope to have some news on that soon. So if you are running into the limit of 10, know that Microsoft is working on it, and we hope to have something soon to share on that. So that I believe what the fix is they're just going to make the permissions check a little bit more selective, because we're on a form. There's no, what we can do is to optimize that query is say, hey, I'm on an account form or I'm on a case form. I don't have to worry about the permissions about SharePoint documents on opportunities or invoices. I just care about, do I have access to it through the case, for example. So limiting the scope of that entity or of those permissions will hopefully allow us to get around that limit of 10. Now the limit of 10 will still exist. It's just that you won't be penalized every time you add another SharePoint document or another table for SharePoint on the portal. You'll be able to have essentially as many as you want, as long as that one entity or that one table isn't 7 or 8 relationships away. So hopefully that will make lives easier. In the meantime, I know we've run into this with a few clients, and we do have some kind of crazy workarounds where we use Power Automate to create extra records and make them related, and it's not pretty. It works, but it's not pretty. So we're very hopeful or happy to see that this change will come and will simplify, and we no longer will have to be worried about how many records do you want to enable for SharePoint, because people always, this is a very popular feature, and it's one of those things where they use it once, they use it twice, and they say, oh, can we use it again? It's like, well, we have to check. We have to see how many links we have right now, and because we don't really want to have to implement that really kind of complex workaround if we don't have to. So thankfully, we're looking forward to having that limitation removed. So that's kind of what I want to talk about in terms of document management. So we've got the web files, we've got knowledge articles, we've got notes, we've got portal comments, and we've got SharePoint. So we really like the SharePoint integration. We use it all the time, but the big thing is just don't, too often we see it overpromised and underdelivered. They think that, oh, it has SharePoint integration, so all of the great features that you can do in SharePoint, you can do in a portal, and that's simply not the case. You can allow users to upload documents to the SharePoint location associated with the record. They can upload, they can delete, all those permissions are accessible, but all the other features that you see with SharePoint, with versioning and all the other stuff that SharePoint gives you, that's not what the portal gives you. The portal gives you the ability to download, upload, and delete those documents associated to records in Dataverse. So just be aware of that, and you'll be a lot happier and not overpromise and underdeliver. The next call, we're going to be meeting again in the new year, January 20th at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific. So hope to see you there. As always, just want to, again, shout out, thank you to the folks at MS Dynamics World. I hope you and your family have a great holiday season. If you celebrate any of the holidays that are going on right now, hope you get some time to rest, relax, and hopefully we'll see you back in the new year all refreshed. Yeah, thanks a lot, everyone, and hope to see you in January.